Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. This is the Newsfeed PM edition as we take a deep focus on the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial of the men accused of killing the former Bafana Bafana captain. It will resume tomorrow morning. The trial was postponed on Wednesday this week after a new docket threw a spanner in the works. To get you back up to speed, we thought we would take you back to some of the key moments from court over the course of this week. Let's start on Monday, where Advocate Malesela Teffo, who is representing accused 1 to 4, slammed the police for allegedly beating confessions out of the men. Teffo says the confessions should be inadmissible and urged the court to act accordingly.
If this court ignore this humble plea that there will be the action by this court, that action of the ostrich, dipping the head in the sand, say, I see nothing. It will be at the peril of this honorable court to say the cross-examination as it is now supersedes the hearing of the application of the trial within the trial. It will not only be that at the peril of this court, but it will be a sad day in the constitutional democracy of South Africa, for which the blood of the stalwarts and the martyrs streamed down the Limpopo River, down the Umfolozi, irrigating the trees. The blood of the Mahlangus and the Robert Sobukis of this country. We cannot afford to ignore that. These people who have been assaulted by the police, to extend that we say we had enough, we don't need the second assault, the fourth assault. Say whatever you want to say, the policemen and woman. What do you want from us? No, we want confession. Agree. Incriminate yourself to say you did act in a wrong way on the 26th of October 2014. And the poor sons of the soil, accused 1 and 2, they had no choice. They were left with a very difficult choice to write, to depose the affidavit. In that is a confession, and also they allowed themselves, insofar as accused 1 is concerned, was taken to the address that he never knew, to say, I will point where I was, and I will point where accused number 2 was, where accused number 3 was, where accused number 4 and 5 were. If we be given that allowance, Your Lordship, that if the state has got the trust or has got the confidence so much that if the application be heard and be granted, at the conclusion, the state will be victorious. Then the state will not say, no, let's first entertain some things that this court didn't know about. Even if this court hear them, it will be left aghast, surprised. It cannot be that. Let's proceed with a main trial, whereby we'll call the witnesses. By the way, Your Lordship, in this case, the state has got about 130 witnesses, for which I doubt if these 130 are genuine witnesses.
All right, for more on this story, let's cross live now to our reporter, Tshegohaco Moagi. Very good afternoon to you, Tshegohaco. I suppose as we listen to that demand, that plea, that the call for a trial within a trial should not fall on deaf ears.
Absolutely, Mpho. Good afternoon to you. So that is exactly what we heard from Advocate Malesela Teffo on Monday during his plea for there to be a trial within a trial, of course, saying that, the issue around his clients, which is accused number 1 to 4, that they were allegedly beaten to actually give the testimony or the confession that they actually gave to the police. So that was definitely his plea, and he's really hoping that it does not fall on deaf ears. But of course, Judge Chifiwa Maumela has insisted quite a few times during court proceedings that he is currently dealing with this matter, the matter of docket number 636, which is the one that we are seeing in court now, of these 5 men being accused. And he's often requested that the counsel sticks to speaking around that particular docket and not raise other issues before him, as we have now seen with Advocate Malesela Teffo. We do know that they have said that they will continue with this plea and this request that there is a trial within a trial to ensure that these men are, that they actually get released somehow on the charges against them of killing Senzo Meyiwa. And we've heard in that very clip, Mpho, where Advocate Malesela Teffo saying that, his clients were told and were beaten to actually give a confession. But he's also consistently said that they do not know the house where Senzo Meyiwa was actually killed, and that they were, an scapegoat, so to speak, for the state in order for them to be able to bring this trial to where we are sitting now at this moment. And he's also said that, they do not know the house where Senzo Meyiwa was killed. They've also said there are charges also against them of assault, alleged assault that were laid against them by Zandile Khumalo. And he said that they don't even know who Zandile Khumalo is. They've never met her in their life. And this is, of course, something that Advocate Malesela Teffo has consistently put forward to the court and also to the state witness himself, Thabo Mosia, the very first state witness, that these men do not know anything about the killing of Senzo Meyiwa on that particular day. Some of them, and probably know, have already been charged with some of other charges against them. They have already facing sentences against them as they appear in court in the North Gauteng High Court during the Senzo Meyiwa trial. So it will be quite interesting to see how far Advocate Malesela Teffo, together with his instructing attorney, Tshepo Tobane, how far they are able to actually get with this trial within a trial, and if they'll be able to convince the court that this needs to happen before the actual trial continues, this trial against who actually killed Senzo Meyiwa.
And I suppose the defense has gone to length to show that the court that the crime scene was compromised and evidence perhaps possibly planted.
Well, Mpho, this is the thing about the very first state witness around what did he do when he arrived on the scene. And as you've mentioned, the defense attorneys, which is Advocate Malesela Teffo, of course, representing accused number 1 to 4, but also Advocate Zandile Mshololo, who's representing accused number 5, they have really gone at length in their questioning to say to Sergeant Thabo Mosia, who was the forensic expert on the scene, that the crime scene was actually contaminated. I mean, they spoke around the issues of how long did it actually take him to arrive on the crime scene. We understand that Senzo Meyiwa was shot at about past 8 p.m. on that fateful night on the 26th of October 2014, whereas Thabo Mosia, the state witness, he arrived the following day just after midnight on the 27th of October. And the defense attorneys have really gone at lengths to try and make him see that this crime scene could have been contaminated before he arrived. Something that we actually heard from Advocate Malesela Teffo himself was the issue of a suspected meeting, alleged meeting, that took place between Brigadier one of the brigadiers that was actually on the scene, Brigadier Ndlovu, he arrived on the scene, and he's the one that Sergeant Thabo Mosia has been speaking about as to what he needed to take, the photos that he needed to take. And it seems as though from the questioning that had come out that Thabo Mosia did not take his own expertise, so to speak, into consideration as he was taking certain photos, as he was taking DNA swabs. So Brigadier Ndlovu allegedly had a meeting with some of the top officials within the police force, including the community safety MEC at the time, Sizakele Nkosi Malobane, and they apparently had this meeting to allegedly forge what actually happened at the crime scene. They apparently came up with this plan that there was a robbery that took place on that evening. And so by the time that Sergeant Mosia arrived, certain things had already happened within the crime scene. People had already allegedly entered that house. And there was also a letter that was read out by Advocate Mshololo around one of the neighbors who spoke about what she saw when she arrived at the crime scene. So which goes to show as well that people were now doing an in and out of that house, which was a crime scene where Senzo Meyiwa was killed. And in that letter, this neighbor says that, she saw people there. She saw cleaning that was taking place allegedly by Maggie Piri, and she questioned as to why is there cleaning that is being taken place when there has just been a crime or when somebody has been shot, and she never quite got a response to that. So it goes to show that they're really trying to dig the holes within his testimony about the time between the time that he got the call, the time that Senzo Meyiwa died or was shot at that house, and the time that he actually arrived on the crime scene. The issue, of course, around photos as well has been quite a contentious one for Sergeant Thabo Mosia. We heard now from Advocate Zandile Mshololo that he only took 8 photos on that day, 8 photos that actually could have shown what could have possibly happened on the crime scene. Another interesting thing that came out of Sergeant Thabo Mosia's cross-examination was that he did not take any gunshot residue on the people that were in the house at the time. He did not take any DNA swabs on the door where this alleged perpetrator walked in, or the alleged robber walked in to actually commit this crime. So those two already are, a huge sign for the defense that what exactly then took place on that particular evening, and what did he take swabs of when he arrived on the early hours of the 27th of October.
I suppose another question, Tshegohaco, really revolves around what happened on day 2, how more photos were taken, and questions around how he could have missed some of the corners that he was meant to really have taken into account and added to those 8 photos.
Indeed, Mpho. So Sergeant Thabo Mosia arrived just after midnight. He took those 8 photos, from what we've now been told in court, that he took those 8 photos. Then he left the crime scene, handing it back over to Brigadier Ndlovu. When he was questioned around where were the people in the house at that time, he says that he requested that they sit in a room. That was the one thing that he had initially said during his first cross-examination by Advocate Malesela Teffo and during his evidence in chief. But when he was then questioned by Advocate Mshololo, he says that he requested the people to actually leave the house. So it was just him and Brigadier Ndlovu in the house at the time. So she, of course, then found a problem with that testimony that he gave. So when he left the crime scene, he tells the court that he left the crime scene to wait for the task team to actually come in and assist him with the scene. And he's then been questioned by Advocate Mshololo as to what was difficult. Was it difficult for him to actually do the work that he is supposed to be doing as a forensic expert, where he needed assistance by Brigadier Ndlovu, or where he needed assistance even by the task team? So he then concedes that, he should not have even been at the crime scene at the first place. He should not have started working on that crime scene. This is what he's told the court, and that he should have actually just waited for the task team to arrive and to assist him in taking the additional photos. So something that, of course, was missed in the better half of the other day of the 27th of October, the latter half when he returned, when the task team had arrived, there was in the corner of the kitchen, there was a projectile, which is part of the bullet that actually was launched on that evening, and he missed that particular evidence, that piece of evidence. He did not take a photo on the time when he arrived, that morning of the 27th when he arrived. Instead, he took that photo later on when the task team had arrived and was then walking with him through the crime scene. So evidence such as that has, of course, been brought forward by the court and the defense and advocates around what exactly did he do and when did he need the assistance of the task team. It seems, though, Mpho, that, he said in court that Sergeant Thabo Mosia saying in court that there are certain things that there's an SOP for when a famous person actually dies that needs to be followed. And one of those is that there needs to be a task team that is brought in to assist the forensic expert in taking pictures, in taking swabs, in taking all the evidence that is needed to ensure that a trial does go ahead with the right people being on trial and actually being in the accused box. So on the second day, when he arrived back with the task team, there were other things that he then found, things exactly like that projectile where he did not see, which was on the kitchen counter. And that is something that has also been asked by the advocates as to why did he not see that particular projectile, whether he was then told by Brigadier Ndlovu not to take a picture there, or whether that is a spot that he was not shown by Brigadier Ndlovu to actually take a picture of, and he then concedes that it indeed was a spot where he did not take a picture of because he was being shown on the time when he arrived just after midnight. He was shown by Brigadier Ndlovu which areas and which spots to actually take pictures of. So the task team comes in, assists him, and then there's more evidence that comes to light.
Tshegohaco Moagi is our reporter who has been following the case in court, and we take you back to her just to perhaps analyze what came out of that. A lot of attention, the focal point on those qualifications, which then determine why some parts of this investigation have loopholes.
Absolutely, Mpho. So as you heard there in that very clip around the issue of people being tested for alcohol or whether they had alcohol that evening. But the issue also, Mpho, did come up around whether, he did speak to the people, had an interview with the people that were in the house at the time, and he says that he didn't. The issue around his qualifications has been something that Advocate Zandile Mshololo has really spoken about and really spoken quite deeply about during this trial to try and figure out whether he really is a forensic expert. Interestingly enough, he did say that he's an expert. This, of course, at the beginning of the trial, when during his evidence in chief, he did say that he is a forensic expert. He did say that, he knows the work that he needs to do and what he's expected to do when he arrives at a crime scene. So it's then interesting for him to say now that he is some kind of another expert. And we do know Advocate Zandile Mshololo has actually said during her cross-examination that she can't call him an expert, that she'll just say that he is the first person that arrived on the scene. But this was, of course, then stopped by, it was an objection by the state, Advocate Baloyi, saying that he wasn't the first person on the scene, but Advocate Mshololo really just questioning whether he was indeed a forensic expert and the right person to be on the crime scene on that day. This is something that Advocate Mshololo has questioned not just this week, but in the last week as well, where we saw her cross-examination and really just finding out what his qualifications are and how he was able to be described as a forensic expert. And this is something as well that Advocate Malesela Teffo has also questioned around him being a forensic expert and what then determines for him to be a forensic expert if there are so many things that he missed during the time that he was there and taking photos, taking DNA swabs as well. I mean, as I mentioned, Mpho, he did not take DNA swabs of the door, the actual main door that led through to the house where the alleged perpetrator entered. He did not take any swabs there. He did not take gunshot residue of the people who were in the house at the time. The issue, of course, around the crutch as well, that was on the floor. He did not take any DNA there either to check if the crutch actually belonged to the alleged perpetrator or if it was used to defend the people that were in the house at the time when this alleged robbery took place. So the issue of him being a forensic expert and his expertise has been widely questioned by the defense advocates during the cross-examination.
Very well, Tshegohaco Moagi. Let's leave it there for now.